Young birds also, they find it particularly difficult to land on a vertical cliff face. In the pens, they land on a flat branch. And so suddenly they're faced with landing on this tiny vertical ledge. And when trying to land on a cliff, they often just come screaming in at top speed. They don't know how to control their speed at that age. They don't know how to stall. And so luckily, rather than crashing into the cliff, they usually default to landing up on the cliff rim or on the talus below the cliff. I'm getting some static right over my hair. And if they land in either of those places, they often settle down wherever they go to, wherever they land and go to sleep. Condors often lie down like ducks or geese when they go to sleep, and they can be sound sleepers. Shortly after I arrived in Arizona, we lost a bird that roosted on the cliff rim to a coyote at night. So after that, our field crew hazed any birds that landed up on this cliff rim, basically prowled the cliff rim at night. Any birds that were still up there, chased them off so that they would go and land on the cliffs in a safe spot. So there was one instant, for example, where I was in the blind one night and a young bird wanted to feed on one of the carcasses, and there was an older bird on there just stuffing its face, and the young condor just couldn't get on. She was waiting and waiting, finally got tired of waiting, so she lay down and went to sleep. Well, the older bird finally flew off, and it didn't even wake her up. And so here I was looking at this situation where I have a young bird falling asleep, fast asleep next to a carcass. That's just not a good situation. So I crept out of the blind and climbed down the hill and basically just jumped on her as though I were a predator. It scared her half to death. She just shot off the cliff, and that bird never chose a poor roost spot again. So these were the lessons that we taught our young condors. Unfortunately, though, as I mentioned, condors will also default to landing on this steep talus slope. And we ended up losing a bird that roosted on that talus to coyotes one night. And we had thought that area was safe. We couldn't believe that coyotes could, patrol, get through all these cliff bands and patrol such a steep area. But when we lost that bird, we realized that our birds were vulnerable. So from that point on, if any bird landed in that area at dusk, we would basically climb up through all these layers of cliffs, hike up here, and basically chase the bird from one spot to another until it finally landed somewhere inaccessible. This technique was actually highly effective. By doing this, we radically reduced post-release mortality of young condors. Getting a young condor through those first few days post-release, its first few nights, more importantly, until it developed its flight skills was the single most important thing we could do immediately post-release to increase the survival rate of young condors. And now all the release sites have adopted this strategy, namely hazing condors to a safe roost spot at night until they learn to do it on their own. Within a few days, the youngsters do learn how to land on a cliff face, and they quickly follow the older birds' examples in choosing good roost spots. This portion of the Vermilion Cliffs, there's sort of an outline of the continent of Africa when you see it. I don't know if it shows it very well in this picture, but we call this area Africa, and you can see by the amount of whitewash that this is a popular roost spot with the older birds. So when the young birds would finally follow the older birds and land in Africa, that was a big key milestone. That was our goal. Newly released condors also were vulnerable to attacks by golden eagles. In the first 4 years of the program, we lost 3 young condors to attacks by golden eagles. Now, though, there are adult condors at the release site. Unfortunately, the adult condors will chase off eagles, which has helped keep the newly released birds safe. Once the juveniles have developed their flight skills, they are able to evade eagles. But in the meantime, we protected our newly released condors by shooting noisemakers off at any eagles that were aggressively pursuing our young condors. And after instituting those tactics, we lost no more birds to golden eagles. Eventually, the newly released condors leave the release site, and they typically follow the older birds to the Colorado River for the first time, and that becomes a favorite spot for bathing and playing. When I was the field manager, we attempted to locate, using radio telemetry, each condor in our flock every day. We also monitored the birds' feeding and movements on a daily basis. And one of the reasons that we monitored the birds so closely, aside from the fact that they're one of the rarest creatures on Earth, and we needed to keep track of them, was so that we could monitor and, if need be, shape their behavior when they came into contact with people. Upon leaving the release area for its first time, the most important hurdle that a young condor has to overcome is how to cope with people. Before discussing the challenges of dealing with human-condor interactions, I thought it would help to give you a little bit of a primer on condor behavior. No, there we go. Most of you are familiar with ravens and crows. They're intelligent, they're playful, they're somewhat brash. Well, if you picture a scavenger that's just like a raven, only 10 times larger, you essentially have the mentality of a condor. I like to say that I think if you crossed a St. Bernard and a raven, you might come up with a condor. Condors are smart, they're playful, they're curious, and they typically explore the world with their bills, which means that they will mess with anything they can get their little bills on. If you have a group of condors in an area, you can be pretty sure they've either found food or a really fun toy. They'll play tug of war, they'll pull on branches, they love punning objects around like water bottles. I once watched about 12 condors playing one night. Some trash had blown over the rim into the Grand Canyon, and the condors were having a field day with it. There was one bird who was punting a water bottle with his bill, jumping over bushes, chasing the bottle down slope. Another bird was dragging around the garbage can lid. Other condors were playing tug of war with objects. They were having a field day, and they would not go to bed that night. They were having so much fun. It was waited and waited for them to get tired of it, so it was a late night. And as I mentioned, they're also incredibly intelligent. Somebody on our crew watched a condor playing with a water bottle on a beach, and she was punting it with her bill and pushing it down the beach. And as she did so, she got closer and closer to the water. And the water suddenly took the water bottle away. And it's anthropomorphizing, so attributing human values to animals, but she seemed crushed to see this water bottle get taken downstream. She was running alongside it on the beach and looking out at it. And luckily it got caught in an eddy, but she couldn't reach it. She kept kind of trying to get out there with her bill, and it was too far. So she looked around and she spied a boulder that was sticking up out of the water. And so she jumped onto that, and from that vantage point, she was able to push the water bottle toward the shore with her bill, and then jump in the water and keep pushing it back to the shore, and then tearing up and down on the beach, playing with her water bottle again. So she was able to retrieve it. Scientists say that intelligence is shown by having a multiple thought process to solve problems, and clearly that wasn't rote behavior. That condor had to think about how she wanted to save that water bottle. So the condors also all had just different personalities. They all were completely different, and they were unbelievably fun to observe. Having few natural predators, though, condors unfortunately are not very wary, and their curiosity can sometimes get them into trouble. While a raven might get away with this sort of behavior, a released condor cannot. The area where we had our most frequent condor-people interactions in the early days of the program was here at the south rim of Grand Canyon National Park, basically the most heavily visited site at the park. Although condors have hundreds of miles of open space to frequent, they often congregate at the south rim during the spring and summer. So why, might you ask, are they so attracted to this particular people area? Well, one of our theories is that in the distant past, condors probably were attracted to large herds of mammals, because wherever there were large herds of mammals, there were sure to be fatalities, and that meant food. Well, now the large herds of mammoths and other Pleistocene mammals have been replaced by human herds. Crowds of people on those rims. And probably if it weren't for search and rescue teams and park rangers and medevac helicopters, the condors might be right in thinking it's a great food source. But in addition, though, condors do key into ravens and turkey vultures to help them find food. And ravens and turkey vultures are incredibly abundant in the park. Condors are attracted to these other scavengers, and they always investigate their activities. At the South Rim, they're usually rewarded. As Marker mentioned, the birds find abundant animal carcasses. There are a lot of animals here, and unfortunately for them, a lot of them die, but that's to the condors' benefit. And finding that many animal carcasses reinforces the condors' impression that this area is just a great place to be. Viewing condors at the South Rim is an unparalleled experience. It's probably the easiest place to view condors in North America. South Rim's getting a little competition from the area around Zion National Park right now. A lot of birds are spending time up there. But the South Rim, it's still very easy to see them when they're in that cove area at the South Rim. A lot of people can see them. And that's a really unique situation. The public can enjoy a flagship endangered species in its natural habitat. Most endangered species are off limits to the public or in places that are very remote and difficult to observe them. But here at Grand Canyon, you can just see a very, very endangered species flying around. Condors have become a huge attraction at Grand Canyon, and the birds make a tremendous impression on people. As I mentioned, they are also now spending a lot of time at Zion National Park. More and more, it seems.